Ernesto Guevara was not born a revolutionary. He began his life in Argentina, a young man with a passion for medicine and, a real thirst for adventure. His world was one of books, rugby, and intellectual curiosity, far removed from the battlefields that would later define his name. Yet within him lay a restless spirit, an inability to accept the world as it was presented to him. This inherent dissatisfaction with the status quo would become the driving force behind his extraordinary transformation. He saw himself as an explorer, not just of landscapes, but of the human condition itself, a journey that would, honestly, irrevocably alter his destiny and set him on a path towards history. His famous motorcycle journey across Latin America was the catalyst for this profound change. Along with his friend Alberto Granado, Guevara traveled through the Andes, the Amazon, and the desolate Atacama Desert. He was no longer just a tourist, he was a witness. He saw the deep-seated poverty that afflicted the indigenous populations, the exploitation of miners, and the marginalization of lepers. These were not abstract concepts from a political textbook, but harsh, lived realities. The journey stripped away his youthful naivety, replacing it with a burning sense of injustice and a profound empathy for the dispossessed peoples he encountered on his travels across the continent. The experiences on the road solidified a belief that was taking root in his mind. The continent's ailments were interconnected. He observed how powerful foreign companies, often American, profited from the region's natural resources, while local communities languished in poverty. He saw how national governments seemed to serve these external interests rather than the needs of their own people. This first-hand observation of systemic inequality and imperialist influence planted the seeds of his revolutionary ideology. He began to see Latin America not as a collection of separate countries, but as a single, unified entity struggling against a common oppressor. By the time his journey ended, Ernesto the medical student was beginning to fade, and Che the revolutionary was starting to emerge. His personal diary from this period reveals a man grappling with a newfound political consciousness. He concluded that the injustices he had witnessed could not be cured with medical remedies alone. They required a radical, structural transformation of society. The desire to heal individuals was replaced by a more ambitious, and far more dangerous, aspiration to heal an entire continent. This conviction would eventually lead him to Guatemala and then to Mexico, where his path would fatefully cross with a group of Cuban exiles led by Fidel Castro. In Mexico City, Guevara's life took another decisive turn. He was introduced to Fidel and Raúl Castro, who were meticulously planning an expedition to overthrow the Cuban dictator, Fulgencio Batista. The Castros were immediately impressed by Guevara's fierce intellect, his medical skills, and his unwavering commitment to the cause of anti-imperialism. For Guevara, the Cuban exiles represented the action he had been searching for, a tangible opportunity to fight against the very forces of oppression he had railed against. He did not hesitate. He joined their revolutionary movement, the 26th of July movement, initially as the group's doctor, ready to put his training to use in the impending conflict. The journey aboard the Granma yacht to Cuba was a disaster, a near-fatal beginning to the revolution. Ambushed upon landing, the small band of 82 rebels was decimated, with only a handful, including Guevara and the Castro brothers, managing to escape into the dense, unforgiving mountains of the Sierra Maestra. It was in this crucible of survival that Guevara's true capabilities were forged. He proved to be more than just a physician who tended to the wounded. He was a natural soldier. He demonstrated immense courage under fire, a keen strategic mind, and a strict sense of discipline that he imposed upon himself and others. His transformation from doctor to warrior was swift and complete. He quickly rose through the ranks, earning the trust of Fidel Castro and the respect of his fellow fighters. He was promoted to the rank of Comandante, the first to receive the title, and was given command of his own column of guerrilla soldiers. Guevara was not just a fighter. He was a teacher of guerrilla warfare, establishing training camps, enforcing discipline, and indoctrinating new recruits with revolutionary fervor. He was known for his toughness and his refusal to tolerate insubordination, qualities that were essential for maintaining cohesion and morale in the face of overwhelming odds. The culmination of his military prowess came during the Battle of Santa Clara in late 1958. Leading his column, Guevara executed a daring attack on the strategically vital city, derailing an armored train full of government troops and weapons in a pivotal engagement. This decisive victory shattered the morale of Batista's army and paved the way for the rebels' final march into Havana. The fall of Santa Clara was the final nail in the coffin of the Batista regime. On the 1st of January 1959, the dictator fled Cuba, and the revolutionaries claimed victory. Che Guevara, the Argentine doctor, had become a triumphant comandante of the Cuban Revolution. With victory secured, Guevara took on a central role in shaping the new Cuban state. He was not content to be a mere soldier. His ambition was to be an architect of a new society. He held several key positions, including President of the National Bank and Minister of Industries, where he sought to implement his radical economic and social ideas. He was a fervent believer in communism, envisioning a Cuba free from the chains of capitalism and American influence. His goal was to diversify the economy away from its dependence on sugar and to foster a new consciousness, creating the new man, a selfless, disciplined and work-oriented citizen devoted entirely to the collective good. Guevara's ideology was fundamentally rooted in anti-imperialism. He saw the United States as the primary enemy of developing nations, a global power that used economic and political manipulation to exploit the resources and labor of Latin America and beyond. He argued that true independence could only be achieved by severing all ties with capitalist powers and forging alliances with the Soviet bloc and other socialist nations. His fiery speeches at international forums, including the United Nations, denounced American foreign policy and called for a global front against imperialism, making him a prominent and controversial voice on the world stage. At the heart of his political philosophy was the unwavering belief in armed struggle. Guevara was convinced that entrenched, oppressive regimes, backed by powerful foreign interests, would never relinquish power peacefully. He argued that violent revolution was not only necessary, but also a moral duty for those seeking liberation. He theorized about guerrilla warfare, writing manuals and articulating the concept of the FOCO, the idea that a small, dedicated band of revolutionaries could create the conditions for a wider popular uprising. For Che, the battlefield was the ultimate classroom. An armed revolution was the only language that tyrants would understand. This led to his famous call to create 2, 3, many Vietnams across the world. He believed that the Cuban Revolution was not an isolated event, but a model to be exported. He grew impatient with the bureaucratization of the Cuban government and the cautious diplomacy of the Soviet Union. His revolutionary spirit demanded constant action, a perpetual war against injustice wherever it was found. This restless desire to remain on the front lines of the global struggle ultimately led him to leave his comfortable position in Cuba, first for a failed campaign in the Congo, and then for his final, fateful mission in Bolivia. Today, the figure of Che Guevara is deeply polarized, his legacy contested between two irreconcilable narratives. For millions around the world, he remains a potent symbol of rebellion, social justice, and defiance against oppression. His iconic image, captured in Alberto Corda's famous photograph, has become a universal emblem for those who challenge authority and fight for the underdog. He is seen as a martyr who sacrificed a life of comfort for his principles, a romantic idealist who dared to dream of a more equitable world and was willing to die for that dream. His story inspires activists, students, and revolutionaries who see in him the embodiment of unwavering conviction. Conversely, another powerful narrative portrays him as a ruthless tyrant and a cold-blooded executioner. Critics point to his role as head of the La Cabana fortress prison in the early days of the revolution, where he presided over the trials and executions of hundreds of perceived enemies of the state, including former Batista officials and political dissidents. They argue that his vision of the new man was a totalitarian fantasy that required brutal repression to enforce. For Cuban exiles and victims of the communist regime, he is not a hero, but a monster, a man responsible for immense suffering, the suppression of freedom, and the establishment of a police state that has endured for decades. This stark duality defines any discussion of his life. Was he a freedom fighter or a fanatic, a visionary or a dogmatist? The truth is likely found in the complex and often contradictory space between these two extremes. He was a man of profound compassion, who could also be mercilessly pragmatic in the pursuit of his goals. He fought against the exploitation of the poor, but advocated for a political system that curtailed individual liberties. His commitment to justice was absolute, yet his methods were often brutal. To understand Che is to grapple with these paradoxes, to accept that heroic ideals can coexist with violent actions. Ultimately, Che Guevara's lasting impact lies in his power to inspire. Beyond the political debates and historical critiques, his life story continues to resonate as a powerful call to action. He represents the idea that one person can, through sheer force of will, dedicate their life to a cause greater than themselves. Whether viewed as a saint or a sinner, his legacy endures as a challenge to complacency and an affirmation of the struggle for a better world. For anyone who feels a sense of injustice and dreams of making a difference, the ghost of Che Guevara still walks, a perpetual symbol of revolution.